So I thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and we'll be back very soon. You have a great, beautiful day. Nobody sees the grind phase, but that invisible phase only becomes valuable when you convert it into output. That connects everything. Grind phase, subtraction, writing, authority, passive living, conversion, products, execution, becoming. Here is the structured long form version. Nobody sees this part. Nobody notices the phase where everything is built. No recognition, no validation, no signal that is working. Just repetition and doubt. At some point you start asking yourself the same question every day. What am I actually doing? Because nothing around you confirms it. No applause, no results you can point to, no external proof that this path leads anywhere. That is the real cost most people don't talk about. Not effort, not discipline, but uncertainty. Some people build their lives around certainty. They choose paths where the outcome is predictable, structured timelines, defined promotions, clear validation. There is nothing wrong with that, but that is not this path. This path is different. You don't know if it works. You don't know when it works. You don't even know what it fully becomes. You move anyway, not because you have proof, but because you've reached a point where staying the same is no longer an option. That is where the invisible phase begins. The part nobody sees, the part nobody claps for, the part that makes you question everything. And if you do not understand what this phase is for, you will choose silence with failure. You will think nothing is happening because nobody is reacting. You will think you are behind because you cannot point to obvious results yet. You will think the absence of attention means the absence of progress. But that is not always true. Sometimes the most important progress is happening before the world has language for it. Sometimes your life is being rebuilt internally long before anything external changes. Your standards shift. Your awareness sharpens. Your tolerance decreases. You begin to see things you used to ignore. That is progress. Just not the kind people celebrate. Because silent progress does not look impressive, but it is often the only kind that lasts. Here is the cost of becoming. Most people quit here, not because they cannot do the work, but because they cannot tolerate not being seen. That is the real test. Not intelligence, not talent, not even ambition. The test is whether you can keep building before anyone believes in what you're building. Before anyone sees you, before anyone believes you, before anyone cares. You all know I created this term called dark mode. It takes dark mode to keep building on the long, lonely road, because this phase does something to you. What is dark mode? Dark mode is something that I created when I was at my darkest times. It is something that helped me to believe, or to keep me on track of, it's a relentless, obsessive focus, intense concentration. You know, you have to be focused before you can concentrate. So what can keep you staying focused is the relentless concentration, because this phase does something to you. It strips away performance. It removes the need of applause. It forces you to confront whether you actually want the thing or whether you only wanted the recognition that came with it. So you're going to have to not care. Most people don't fail here. They leave because they mistake silence for lack of progress. But the real move is not to keep searching for proof. The real move is to remove what slows you down. Less distraction, less noise, less approval seeking. That is how clarity shows up. Not through more, through subtraction. You are not just moving toward clarity. You are moving through subtraction. You already know more than you think. Not because someone taught you, but because your experiences have already shown you what does not work, what drains you, what misaligns you, what you refuse to tolerate again. That is data, real data. But most people ignore it. They override it. They go back to what is familiar instead of doing the harder thing, removing what does not belong, because subtraction is uncomfortable. It forces you to walk away. It forces you to say no. It forces you to sit in silence. It forces you to exist without immediate replacement. But that is where clarity actually comes from. Not adding more, removing what is in the way. And while all of this is happening from the outside, it looks like nothing. No visible progress, no impressive milestones, no story worth telling yet. But internally, everything is changing. Nobody sees the grind phase, but it sees you. It reveals whether you are serious. It reveals whether you are committed. It reveals whether you can keep going without immediate proof. And if you can stay in this invisible, uncertain, quiet phase long enough without needing validation, without needing certainty, without needing recognition, you don't just change your life. You become someone unrecognizable to who you used to be. Growth has a cost. Everything comes with a cost. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Are you courageous enough to outgrow yourself, to live by your will, and refuse to stay small just to keep others comfortable? Most people do not stay small because they lack potential. They stay small because growth comes with a cost. Less approval, less familiarity, less acceptance from the people who knew the old version of them. So they choose comfort over truth and call it being realistic. Growth is not hard only because of the work. It is hard because of what it forces you to leave behind. Old environments, old habits, old identities, old relationships with your own excuses. That is why people romanticize transformation but avoid the actual process. They want the new life without the death of the old self. If you read my letters, you know I came up with the acronym DE, die every day. Every single day, a piece of yourself needs to be dying. Why? Because you cannot be so attached to your old self where you cannot transform, where you cannot evolve. Personal evolution is going to cost you to kill the old self. So again, they want the new life without the death of the old self. But that is not how becoming works. Becoming requires loss. You lose the version of yourself that survived through avoidance. You lose the habits that made you feel safe but kept you ineffective. You lose the people who only knew how to love the smaller version of you. If people aren't for you being for you, they're not for you. But sometimes what feels like isolation is actually alignment. Sometimes what feels like loss is actually subtraction. Sometimes what feels like silence is actually construction. This is the phase. No one sees it. But this is the phase that builds everything. The skill of authority architecture. During this grind phase, writing has always been my way of laying the foundational bedrock for ideas, systems, products, businesses, and everything I want to push into the world and into the web. I love writing. I've been writing ever since I've been a kid. The two things I've been doing ever since I've been a kid was writing and acting. I was pretty much born into those two arts. Sports came along after a while, but writing and acting has always been a part of me. Writing is not just expression. Writing is architecture. It shows how you think. It shows how you solve. I don't like using the word solve solutions, but for you to understand where I'm coming from, it does show you how you can solve problems. But again, there is no such thing as solutions, only trade-offs. So I will say that writing, it shows how you can find better alternatives to the problems that you are facing. It shows how you structure ideas. That is how authority is built, not by pretending to be an expert, but by consistently showing your thinking in public. When people read my writing or your writing, they are not only reading words, they are evaluating judgment. They are asking, can this person think clearly? Can this person explain what I feel but cannot articulate? Can this person help me see something I have been missing? Can this person turn confusion into structure? That is the power of writing. Writing should build clarity, not rumination. It should take what is floating in your head and make it visible, making the intangible tangible. Once something is visible, it can be examined. Once it can be examined, it can be structured. Once it can be structured, it can be executed. And once it can be executed, it can become value. That is the process, not overnight, not instantly, not because one person goes viral, but through repeated, consistent, documented thinking. You may not see immediate results, no money, no impact, no obvious success, but there is a phase where you are not supposed to be paid yet. You are supposed to build signal. You are supposed to be sharpening your thinking. You are supposed to be creating volume. You are supposed to be establishing identity. Money comes later from compounded clarity and consistent presence. That is why inconsistency is so dangerous. Inconsistency does not just break your posting schedule, it breaks momentum, it interrupts identity, it weakens the signal. And once that is fixed, everything else starts to compound. Because the person who shows up consistently with clear thinking becomes very difficult to ignore over time. Most people have a passive problem. Most people do not have a time problem. They have a passive problem. They consume, they scroll, they watch, they sit in thought, and it feels like they are doing something, but nothing is being converted. So nothing changes. This is one of the most dangerous traps in modern life. Passive activity disguised as progress. You can watch videos all day and call it research. I used to have a problem with this. I used to get caught in analysis paralysis. I used to get caught up, and I still sometimes do get caught up in mental masturbation, thinking you probably don't know what mental masturbation is, but in so many words, it is something that you are doing something, and you are consuming so much information. You think that you are doing something, that you are actually learning something. You can watch lectures all day and actually build nothing, or actually write nothing and post and publish nothing, where the world can actually judge you based on your ideas. It is a difference between just going to school all day and somebody who probably doesn't go to school, but they're out in the world experiencing, collecting data, and building, creating businesses or creating products and pushing it out for the world. Whether it sucks or not, whether they fail or not, they are actually doing more than the individual who sits in a lecture all day and thinks they're doing something. Huge difference. So this is passive activity disguised as progress. You can collect information and call it learning, but if nothing becomes output, nothing has truly changed. That is where most people get stuck, not because they do not care, but because they never convert. They consume information, but never turn it into insight. They have ideas, but never turn them into structure. They feel pain, but never turn it into writing. They experience life, but never turn it into value. That is passive living. And I've been a victim of passive living. I had to sit down and make a stand to myself and say that I just finished my first screenplay. And like I said, I've been writing since I've been a child. I have so many ideas, so many movie ideas that I wanted to do. And I just kept waiting and sitting around for something for out there to say yes, instead of me just taking control of my life and me finishing something and me doing it no matter what's happening in my life, no matter what other people are saying. There has to be a time where you just sit down and you just finish and start doing things. I'm actually writing a book right now. It's called The Do Effect. And the Do Effect is literally talking about what I'm talking about right now. You just have to do the damn thing. You cannot care if it sucks. You cannot care what other people is going to say to you. That's actually good. Because you want people, when you put out there, you want people's judgment. Now, it doesn't matter if it's negative or positive. Both of those are good. Bad press is good press when you are a creator. So passive living creates confusion, hesitation, overthinking, wasted time, because when you are not directing your actions, you start asking, what am I supposed to be doing right now? That question is not always a sign that you need more options. Sometimes it is a sign that your life lacks conversion. You are taking in more than you are putting out. You are absorbing more than you are creating. You are thinking more than you are executing. And the longer that continues, the more your mind becomes crowded with unused material, unused thoughts, unused lessons, unused observations, unused pain, unused potential. Nothing should stay passive. Everything must be converted into active value. The real shift is conversion. The answer is not more thinking. It is conversion. Everything you do must become active. If you are learning, write about it. If you are thinking, structure it. If you are consuming, extract from it. If you are feeling, document it. If you are planning, turn it into the next action. Nothing stays idle. Nothing. Because the moment something stays passive, it starts decaying. That is why writing matters so much. For me, everything starts with writing. So when I do not know what to do, I write. When I feel unclear, I write. When I feel overwhelmed, I write. When I am trying to understand my routine, my goals, my desires, my problems, my frustrations, or my next move, I write. Not to be perfect, even though I strive for perfection, but I know I will never be perfect, but to make things visible. Writing turns the invisible into material. It turns confusion into form, experience into structure. And once it has structure, it becomes something useful. A post, a newsletter, a video, a product, a system, a guide, a business. That is how life becomes leverage. You stop letting experiences pass through you unused. You capture them, you structure them, you convert them. The execution rule is writing is not the end though. It is just the beginning. So after writing comes one rule, you execute. You turn passive into active. Watching is, like I said, it becomes building, because there is a trap most people fall into. It feels like progress, but nothing is being produced. That is tutorial hell. That is analysis paralysis, fake productivity, mental motion without external evidence, thinking without output, studying without application, planning without movement. That is why execution matters so much. Execution exposes you. Execution reveals what you actually understand. Execution forces contact with reality. You can think endlessly and still avoid being wrong. But the moment you execute, reality responds. That response becomes feedback. That feedback becomes correction. that correction becomes judgment. That judgment becomes power. That is how you build. Not by waiting until you feel ready, but by moving, seeing what happens, adjusting, and moving again. Most people quit because they expect to be good too early. You are not supposed to be good yet. You are supposed to be building. You are supposed to suck. You are going to look average. You are going to feel behind. You are going to question everything. That's what you're supposed to do. That is the phase. This is the phase. The ones who make it do not avoid this phase. They are not afraid of making a fool out of themselves. They stay in it longer than everyone else. They keep building while they are still bad. That's the whole point. They keep publishing while they are still refining. They keep improving while nobody is clapping for them. And over time, repetition does what motivation could never do. That's why I don't depend on motivation. I depend on systems. It turns effort into skill. The leverage layer is, I saw something recently that said, create one PDF, sell it for $27 1,000 times, and that's $27,000. So is it really that simple? No. But the principle is correct. Your life, thoughts, experiences, lessons, studies, observations, and systems can be converted into products, PDFs, guides, ebooks, systems, templates, frameworks. Like I said, I just wrote my first screenplay. If you would watch that screenplay, you would not think that that was raw material. That screenplay was something that I was dealing with. At first, I started it off with me just wanting to overcome lust. And then as I kept writing, I dug deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And I just created an entire universe from that. That's my whole point. But this happens, but only if you capture and structure your ideas. That is where most people fail. They live through things and never turn them into value. You have to be creative enough to be able to use your experiences and to package that and to present it to the world into an interesting way for other people to be able to use that for themselves. That's how what you create becomes useful. So the raw material of your life may disappear, but that is the waste, not just wasted time, wasted experience, wasted insight, wasted pain, wasted attention, is wasted potential. The real power move is to build a system where nothing is wasted. Everything gets used. If I learn something, like I said, it will get written. And if I notice something, again, it gets captured. If I think of something, it will get structured. So I thank you all so much for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe. And we'll be back very soon. You have a great, beautiful day.